As a chess player studies games of the great players, um, some games kind of stick to mind and some we forget very fast. But somehow this game of Botvinnik was easy for me to remember, and I was very impressed by how White combined the play against the weaknesses in the opponent's camp, sort of subtle understanding of what pieces to keep on the board and which ones to trade, and all that resulted in a really quick win in only 31 moves. So I was very impressed by this game, so that's why I wanted to go back to it and add some notes to it. This opening variation sort of lies between the Reti opening, the Tarash defense, and the Catalan opening, so it's quite an interesting system. Main line here is knight to d7, but black decided to attack the center immediately. The idea of this move is to make black move the same piece twice, because the bishop already moved to e7, now it has to spend another tempo going to c5. And the other idea is that now black won't be able to play bishop to f6 anytime soon, so the bishop on b2 is gonna be quite strong. So white here has a few options in how to develop the initiative. He can try to play on the queen side, as he decided with his last move with a3. He'll probably follow up with b4, or he can play pawn to e4, expanding in the center. So black got more concerned about the e4 move, and that's why he moved his knight away from d5. But he should have actually tried to prevent b4 by playing pawn to a5. So this is where his difficulties begin in the symmetric position. Here white saw the c6 square as a potential weakness in black's position, and then he offered the exchange of light squared bishops, which should of course make it easier for white to control that square. This is an important idea. What black has done with his last move, he covered up the c6 square with the queen, and he may later play queen to b7 check. And white wants to be able to respond to queen to b7 with queen to f3, by doing that, controlling the c6 square and offering the exchange of queens. And white's slightly more active, so the exchange of queens would probably favor him in that case. If black had taken the queen on f3, he would still have some difficulties defending, because white would put the knight on c6 and double the rooks behind it, maintaining some pressure on the c file. This way white finally puts a strong grip on the c6 square, and it's going to be really hard for black to expel that knight from that square. It was probably better to play bishop to c5. And this is probably the key moment in the game. Black offered the exchange of rooks, which would seem natural, but if white decided to agree to that and exchange the rooks on the a file, he would then have difficulties exploiting his positional advantage. So what he decided instead was to keep the rooks and to ignore the a file. And the thing is, in this position there's more than one open file. There's the a file, there's the c file, there's the d file. So if white, it's possible for white to concede the a file and still keep his rook on a good square. He also noticed that the black rook cannot control the d8 square because the knight is guarding it. So if white gets to play on the d file, black won't be able to oppose him with his rook, and that's why Botvinnik played his next move. This is a great square for the knight. It attacks the b6 pawn, may possibly jump to d6. It also guards the bishop on b2, so there's no point for black to play something like rook to a2. So all of white's pieces now look very well placed, and it's getting getting harder for black to defend against this initiative. Another instructive moment, white kept the pawn on e4 so that the black knight would never be able to come to d5. But now that the black knights have moved around the board, it's no longer relevant, and he no longer has to guard the d5 square. So now he plays pawn to e5 to open the diagonal against the black queen, and also to possibly invade to d6 with his own knight. Now white takes over the a-file, and black has no way of going to the a-file with the rook and challenging white, because after rook a8, rook takes a8, queen takes a8, knight e7 is going to win the queen. So yeah, white now controls the a-file and is probably going to come in with rook to a7, and there's just really no defense against that. And now it turns out that the queen has no good squares to retreat, because if you go, say, queen c8, then knight b6 is just going to win a pawn for nothing. So he had to give up the queen, but that didn't really save the game. And here black resigned. He's unable to regain the b5 pawn, because if he goes rook to b7, then queen c6 is just going to protect everything, and the b pawn is going to roll down the board. So a very instructive game. White just played in a very positional style, and just out of nowhere created the initiative, invaded on c6, and the game was over very quickly. And just these kind of simple wins are often the most impressive ones, the most impressive games by the great players, because it's really hard to understand where did the initiative come from, and how did it so easily get converted into a full point.